Come along, children. Now we're going to have a little music.
Why do you hate this movie?
Do you actually hate it?
RB3.
No, I don't hate it.
Oh,
So
okay.
here's my thing.
But
Like,
you-
I don't hate.
You
I
don't hate
this
it. You're
movie.
right. But you talk a lot of shit about it.
No,
bro.
I'm passionate.
I mean,
Here's the thing.
I talk a lot of shit about the prequels, and I don't actually hate them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So here's the thing. Like, I can appreciate Blade Runner 2049 like as a great movie. If somebody says it's a great movie, I'm not going to argue them on it. If somebody says they watched this movie and didn't connect with the original, but they like this one a whole lot, that's cool. Like, I totally get it because it's new, it's fresher, it has a more modern, contemporary voice. Totally get that. I also totally get people put it at their best of the year. It's going to be on a lot of best of the decade list, but it's just not going to be on mine.
Yeah, which we got to do, bro. I mean, we got to speed that up. Best of the decade, man.
Yeah,
I just saw one of my favorite podcasts already released it, and I'm like, damn, I want to.
We got to slow down.
But no, bro. Best of the decade.
If you ask me personally, we shouldn't put that out till 2023,
No.
but that's a whole different question.
I think we should do it next week.
Yeah,
Well, all right.
Next week, going to do it next week?
Yeah, keep going.
All right, we'll discuss that. Okay, because for me, the thing with Blade Runner 2049 is that it's personal grievances. It's personal shit that I don't like about it. So, like, I can't say that it's a bad movie or it's not a good movie. It's a great movie. It's just something that's not for me. Like you said, the visuals, cinematography, absolutely amazing, mind-blowing stuff. The sound design is absolutely amazing, too. I think to that scene where Kay is getting interrogated before he goes into the police station, it's like a more amplified Von Kemp test, where he's... Von Kemp test, I'm sorry. Where he's...
How dare you not know all the nerdy things?
Yeah, no. You know what's funny? I made a whole joke about Von Kemp back in the Oshmo's No days, and nobody else got it, but whatever. It was on the air, too. I feel embarrassed. The thing is, like, but sound design, great. Cinematography, great. Production design, interesting. The editing, that's not it for me.
Oh.
That to me, this movie is abusively long. I think there's a lot of things that
okay. So you do feel like it is a little long and tedious.
It's not long. It's tedious for this. There's really no motivation for a lot of it. When you look at the original Blade Runner, it has this sort of it is slow and it is slow moving, but there is a lot of life to it. And it's funny because a lot of people criticize Ridley Scott as a filmmaker, saying and a lot of his criticism is that he doesn't know how to bring life to characters. Like, a lot of his characters feel lifeless. A lot of his films feel lifeless, and Blade Runner is the main one that they point to for that. But if this movie, if original Blade Runner is lifeless, this one's like watching a coffin being buried. I mean, goodness gracious, there's entire sequences. Going to the Jared Leto point, there's a whole scene where Jared Leto and I think Ryan Gosling are talking to each other. It's like 10 minutes long, but there's like 5 minutes worth of pauses, like, in between their speech. Like, bruh, there's literally no reason other than the fact to just give you this weird sensation. And to me, I find that really disappointing, particularly because I watched Arrival. Arrival is one of my favorite movies, also by Denis Villeneuve. And that movie is slow and meticulous and slowly paced, and it's like a slow burn too, but it's airtight. Like, it's all for a purpose. And as many times as I've watched Blade Runner 2049, it felt like a lot of this movie is without purpose. That's one thing. That's one personal thing. Another personal thing is not an indictment on the movie itself. It's me. I can't watch this movie and not think I'm watching Her. I can't watch this movie and not think that I'm watching Westworld. I can't watch this movie and not think that I'm watching anything else that Blade Runner has subsequently inspired. And again, that's not. Maybe that's the nerd in me. That's the Blade Runner nerd in me, being like, the original Blade Runner is so groundbreaking. Why aren't you groundbreaking, like, story wise? But that it's funny, we're talking about Watchmen before the show. Watchmen
Let's do it, man.
To me, Watchmen is the perfect example of a show that takes the original concepts and takes the original themes, but completely expounds on it and does something completely original while advancing mythology and creating new mythology. To me, the only problem with this movie is that it felt like it felt like, because it was so far removed, if Blade Runner 2049 came out immediately after the original Blade Runner and it dealt with the themes that I was dealing with, it probably would have hit a lot harder.
Yeah.
But the fact that I did see Her that did the love story, the computer love story, way
Great
better.
movie.
The fact that I saw a whole season of Westworld where they do the beginnings and inklings of a revolution really well on HBO because I saw a number of other because I see movies like The Matrix play with ideas of memory and simulation and all of these concepts.
Even though that is stolen from The Invisibles, but you know,
yeah. But you know,
but yeah, no, I see what you're saying,
But exactly. But it's you see how I just wish they would have expounded upon something different. It felt like it was continuing the same themes as the first Blade Runner, but those themes have already been so watered down through the rest of cinema that it's kind of hard for me to grasp onto what they're saying here in this movie. It doesn't feel fresh at all.
Well, it leads to a different.
That's just me.
It leads to another conversation. It leads to the conversation of what is a great sequel. What is paying homage without being too, like you said, nostalgia heavy, without being too, this is just an imitation of the first one. And it takes me back, maybe because I'm on Collider Jedi Council now. Shout out to Jedi Council.
Hey.
It's one of those things.
You guys are doing a great job.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. And it's one of those things where I was talking to Ken about this, the idea of Bob Iger's book. And if you read that book, or at least the excerpts about Star Wars and George Lucas, he literally says that he sat down with George. This is how much you're going to get. You're going to get $4.4 billion, whatever. And obviously the Kathleen Kennedy thing. But then he started George Lucas started to say, hey, man, this is what you got to do.
Right.
Like, you got to introduce this shit, and this shit's crazy, and then fucking aliens from over here do this shit. And Bob is like, all right, cool. Chill out, man. We're paying you $4 billion. And then when he sat down with someone like a J.J. Abrams, the only thing they wanted to do, the only concern that Bob had was just don't offend anyone. Like, literally just make it look like the original and everyone's going to be happy. And I read the Rolling Stone article with J.J. Abrams, and he said he just wanted to take the exact same story structure but make it for a different character, for Rey. Which is fine. I still think The Force Awakens works, but it's that idea of following up a sequel, but it's different though than making like a Spider-Man 2, because or like a sequel that follows right after, like 2-3 years later, versus a sequel to something that's considered, like Sabrina said, a classic, a legendary movie like Blade Runner. A director like any director, give this movie to any director, Blade Runner 2049, 95% of them are going to give you something like 2049, in the sense that they don't want to offend anyone. They don't want to step on any toes because they're so precious to the first one, right? It's that idea of like, I'm paying homage, therefore I don't want to change anything that you created. Does that work in a sequel? I don't know.
And and obviously we've learned that as much as I grew up on Disney and I love a lot of their stuff, they do play it very safe now, right? And that's it's the cash grab thing, right? Like, we don't want to piss people off because we want people to give us money, right? Like that's it's a business. That's how they work, right? These people are producers and heads of companies, and they have one goal in mind, right? But I think it's interesting because we're on the Star Wars topic. Empire Strikes Back is one of my favorite sequels of all time. It's my favorite Star Wars movie, and it's because not only does it expand on what the original did with expanding the character story development and all that stuff, but even it was also revolutionary as to like how it looked, and maybe that's because it was different directors, know. But it was a very different movie than the original, right? And those are better sequels to me. Godfather 2, right?
Yes,
like if you start talking about good sequels, like Aliens. Alien is still one of my favorite movies, and it's my favorite in the franchise. But Aliens is a great sequel because it's different, right?
It takes that leap. Terminator 2.
Terminator 2, exactly. And that's the thing that I feel like half of 2049 was kind of aiming at, but then they got scared, and they're like, well, we got to bring Harrison Ford back, and we got to bring Sean Young back, and I feel like it wasn't necessary. Right, and that's where the story started getting slower and weaker to me because of that, right?
Yeah.
And so it sucks. Like, I don't know who makes those choices, but
studios do.
Right, but so maybe they told Denis, this is what you have to do, and otherwise we don't want you to make this movie. I don't know, right?
Yeah.
So I think he did an amazing job with what he had. Yes. Right, compared to most sequels that are formulaic and that do try to please the fans, it's one of the better ones. As much as I would change a lot of things about it.
100%. It really is a fascinating conversation of I just search on Google best sequels, right? Best movie sequels, and like you said, T2, Aliens, Godfather 2, Superman 2, Spider-Man 2, The Dark Knight. Like, these are all...
Gremlins too. Masterpiece.
Gremlins too.
Granted, this movie is a bigger movie
Empire
than the
Strikes
original.
Back.
This movie is a bigger movie than the original Blade Runner.
Sure.
Because
Yes.
they expand to multiple different locations. They go to San Diego. They go to all these different places. And we see expanded
It expands,
mythology.
well,
and
it
does
shows
that.
you what happened to Vegas, which is kind of funny.
Yeah,
It's like, yo,
yeah.
what happened to Vegas? And it's like, yo, what happened to Vegas?
Right. It seems pretty cool.
It exploded,
Yeah.
but
Right.
cool.
Yeah.
Right.
And then San Diego turns into like the literal toilet for LA. And I was
know.
like, yo, all the San Diego people watching this movie are like, really? We're the toilet?
Where did Chinatown go?
Yeah.
I don't know.
And I was like, I didn't see any taco trucks. Like, I was worried about this 2049 future.
So can I just get into my nitpicky bag about like the
Please.
little things I don't like about
Yeah.
this
Sure,
movie?
man.
This is not. It's be really quick. I swear to God. One thing, again, it's not a criticism against the movie. It's a criticism for me as a Blade Runner fan. When you look at this frame behind us, like you
Yeah.
see like all kinds of squares, nicks, like all kinds of shapes and patterns.
Sure.
When you watch Blade Runner 2049, the production design is sparse. Like there is a lot of blank walls. There's a lot of empty spaces. There's a lot of. Whereas you watch the original Blade Runner and Rick Deckard can't even walk through the street without bumping into somebody's elbow. There are multiple shots of Ryan Gosling walking through this movie where the streets are completely empty, where the walls are completely clean. So it has a different feel. That's made that again personal preference. That's not a feel that I want to see in Blade Runner. So it already kind of is a layer removed from what I'm expecting. So
Totally agree, man. And that's I didn't know if that was like an age thing for me or a preference thing because I grew up on all these sci-fi fantasy movies, I have a problem with specifically the Star Wars prequels as to how clean they look, right? Like to me it feels personally like I'm watching a video game and like I'm not watching a real world happen in front of my eyes. And I feel like Blade Runner, not only were the streets busy, but the whole,
every shot was packed to the brim with detail and everything.
And that's what makes you like I don't even know where to look, right?
Yeah.
And that's what makes me believe in the story more. And maybe again, I don't know if that's personal preference, but I do agree with that. As much as it was visually stunning, you're right that it's just like okay, well this is just Ryan Gosling walking amongst a very clean like. As much as it looks beautiful, you know it's a green screen, right? Like so, it takes you away a little bit from the movie.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
One more tiny little.
Give me more, man.
One more tiny little graphics. And again, this bad nitpicky stuff. I get really annoyed in movies when I'm watching a movie and I could look at an entire storyline and think, you could cut this entire storyline and it won't change anything. To me, that's my problem with the Joy. There's two problems. There's a problem with the Joy storyline.
You like Joy?
Yeah, because I do think that if you cut that entire piece out of the movie, the only reason why that whole 45-minute sequence of them hanging out and being together and stuff is there.
You mean the sex scene?
Yeah.
I thought that was a pretty cool scene.
It was
I was
a cool
gonna
scene.
say,
It was a
yeah.
cool
Mackenzie Davis,
Listen,
bro.
it's cool. It's cool.
That's my
It is a
girl.
cool scene. Establishing the revolution and stuff. Cool stuff. Individual scenes in this movie are great.
Right.
It's just to me when it adds up to the bigger picture, none of it connects as well as I want it to.
Sure.
So the only reason I felt like Joy was there is that the henchman for Jared Leto, she can crush her little. She could crush the bot
machine, yeah.
and so it'll kill her.
Yeah.
So that's really the only purpose of that character being there was to be objectified by Ryan Gosling's character.
Yes.
And it didn't really offer much commentary beyond that. You know, of
Interesting.
course she's a program
Hologram,
and
yeah.
hologram, and that's the point. But you think in a movie that presents that point, it would do something to subvert it, but it doesn't really do anything. Even from a story structural level, it doesn't do anything to subvert that.
Well, and it's to me, it's just like trying to rehash the Rachel Deckard relationship. And as much as I liked that scene and I thought it was really cool what they did with it, you're right that it didn't really serve the story. And it's interesting that you mentioned that because to me, it was more so like as soon as I saw Rachel walk in and they're like, "Oh, you guys had a kid," I was just like flipping the table in the theater. I was like, "Why? There's no need for that at all." Especially when like I'm supposed to believe that these characters fell in love when he, you know, like how like weird and violent he was in the first movie. It doesn't make sense.
Sure. What do you guys think of the final third act? And I'll go to you, Sabrina. As far as him being or thinking he is this revolutionary figure to lead kind of this new replicants out of this. Again, what Roy Batty was kind of, like I said in the beginning of this podcast, was supposed to be and represent kind of this like Moses type, Jesus type figure of leading his own people. and then him kind of being deceived and realizing that's not really him. You said you didn't like it because of Westworld already did that.
Oh, no, there's more reasons why I don't like that stuff, but yeah, sure.
I'll start with you, Sabrina.
Yeah.
What do you think of that concept and where it led?
When I first saw it, it worked for me. So I've never seen Westworld, but obviously we'll hear your other reasons for it.
Right.
I kind of like the fact that we followed him. He thinks he's this person, and then he finds out that he's not, and then we're having to deal with like all the aftermath afterwards. So yeah, I enjoyed that twist.
Yeah.
Or that little like not twist, but yeah.
What about you, man? What was your?
Well, no, I vibed at the idea of like thinking that you're some greater chosen being. The only part that I don't like that the movie setting that up is that there's really no. I mean, obviously the beginning investigation where he interrogates Dave Bautista is like the first clue to that. But otherwise, it's all within Kay's own head, and Kay's not a very emotional. Not an easy character to connect with emotionally. So I'm not really invested in his storyline to even begin with. So the fact that it's his own question of like, am I a hero? Am I not a hero? I kind of just automatically check out just from the jump because I don't think his character has a lot of life. And which really says something because Ryan Gosling is honestly one of my favorite actors.
Oh, no
but
way.
yeah, of modern times. But
I thought you were tearing up because you loved Ryan so much.
La La Land, are you kidding me?
But I'm with you, man.
Yeah, but I just think that the fact that question even has to be asked. I mean, it's for one, it's a rehash of the original Blade Runner question. If Rick is a replicant, this one is this guy a natural born replicant. This I don't know. It felt for one, it felt repetitive. For two, Westworld, and for three, I didn't have a connection to Kay, so that's not even a question I even want answered. So
interesting.
I wanted answered while I'm watching the movie. So
I mean, I started to have. I started to really like the Kay character, and even though like I haven't ever been like a huge Ryan Gosling fan because I hated The Notebook so much.
Yeah.
But then I was like, oh, he's actually a really good actor. But it's interesting because I feel like that's what I mentioned earlier, like him just living in that world and being ostracized and being used for the purposes of like, you know, you're a machine that works for us and you have to do what we say, otherwise we're going to terminate you, whatever it is, right? Like that's a kind of a cool and scary thing that I feel like that's what I wish they had focused on more. Whereas like I wish they had gone the route of like Kay is now our Deckard, and where he's definitely a replicant, and we're going to go through his journey. But then he ended up being like just walking us through the journey of the old characters that didn't need to be there. Does that make sense?
Exactly.
And so that's why I didn't like how it ended, and especially like that last scene where he's in the snow and they play the Tears and Rain thing. I'm like, okay, well, yeah, I love this like song, but you guys are
You have to
clearly manipulating me into you know just being emotional about it.
Can I just? I think I was the only one in the theater who my brother turned to me and he's like, "Is he dead?" And I was like, I don't know. Is he? I don't think he is. Is he? I don't know. They didn't make that clear if he died.
Well, they made it clear with the Tears and Rain score.
I know. But it's one of those things where it's like that wasn't super. I don't know. I just thought it was kind of bizarre. Any final thoughts on Blade Runner 2049, and we can peace out of here?
I'm done shitting on it.
Yeah.
Now again, great movie. They're gonna kill me in the comments.
They probably will.